statistical, so unpredictable, here on the SNL Network.
Yes, that's right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the SNL Network's By The Numbers show for season 47, episodes 13 through 15. This is the show where we break down all the stats and data from this season of Saturday Night Live and talk about what it means for the future of the show as we take a look at the cast members and the hosts on the show. So this is always a lot of fun for all of our stats friends out there to come in and dive even deeper into the show. And we always do it with my man, Mike Murray. And Mike, how are you doing? And let me just get this right. Is this our 10th By The Numbers show we're doing together?
You took the words out of my mouth. This is number 10. It's been a hell of a ride.
This is a major milestone, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, for a numbers podcast, this is big number 10.
Yes, for sure. Well, I looked forward to decades of more podcasting with you, Mike. Tell the listeners what you've been up to. How did you enjoy this late February, March run of shows?
There's some highs and lows for sure. Some definitely high highs and low lows, I thought. But I was telling you before, I'm like, even when SNL is bad, I love it. I almost love it like it's the same.
Yeah.
When it's great, I love it. When it's terrible, I love it.
Yeah, we're the sick people that there's no such thing as bad SNL. Like we're those people. So we have a lot of fun with everything that we get to do when we're talking about the show. And someone who is always fun to talk to about Saturday Night Live, it is Nicole Rovine. Nicole, how are you?
I'm good. I completely agree. I think that's something the three of us have in common is it's just whatever is happening, even if things are like people don't like something that's happening, it's just more fun. Like, why don't we like a sketch? Why is it a slump? Added a little Yiddish to that word for some reason. I was feeling it.
First Yiddish on the podcast in 120 episodes we've done.
Yeah, now that I did it once, it felt really good. I have to keep doing it. So I'm so happy to be here. I was just in Los Angeles. I took a red-eye flight I guess I landed like 11 hours ago or something, and I'm feeling really good. I'm on this like adrenaline rush, and then I'm just going to pass out after this.
Yeah. And oy vey, did we have an SNL day full of news? So that was my transition.
There you go.
We had a very newsy SNL day. And normally we don't get to do this on the By The Numbers show, but SNL released their hosts and musical guests on a Monday. So we get to talk about, we're first up to talk about our thoughts on the April lineup. So why don't we do that as a panel, and then we'll get into the power rankings and all the By The Numbers stuff. So let me bring up the press release that SNL puts out. And if you don't know this, SNL puts out a press release whenever they're releasing the stuff on social media at the same time. So let me bring that up on screen. Sorry for our live listeners. All right, I'm having trouble with that. Okay, so I'm going to read the press release. How about that for some of the people? And we'll kind of go through it, and I'll see if I can get that up on screen as we go. All right, Saturday Night Live returns April 2nd. If you have been listening, you would have known that. With 3 back-to-back shows. On April 2nd, we have host Jared Carmichael with musical guest Gunna. On April 9th, we have host Jake Gyllenhaal with musical guest Camila Cabello. And then on April 16th, we have host and musical guest Lizzo. So let's take this in parts. We'll start with our first show on April 2nd and some thoughts on the bookings. So as the press release said, Jared Carmichael will make his Saturday Night Live hosting debut on April 2nd. Carmichael's new special, Jared Carmichael, Rothaniel, debuts April 1st on HBO. Gunna will perform for the first time as SNL musical guest. He has previously been on the show before as a cameo. The Grammy Award-nominated artist's latest album, DS Forever, debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200 chart. So let me start with our pop culture expert on the panel. Nicole, thoughts on the first show we get with Carmichael and Gunna?
I am really excited about this one, and it's because this pick it feels very classic old school SNL. Somebody who it's a line that John Mulaney said in one of his first monologues for SNL, like maybe his first or second one. He said, "I mean a lot to a small amount of people." And that's changed. He's a lot more famous now than he was then. But the point of having like a real comedian who hasn't necessarily transcended the boundaries of comedy, but if you are into comedy, you know this guy and you know he's funny and amazing and has years and years of really amazing amazing content out there. So it feels like the old school SNL that a lot of just comedians would come on, not necessarily like big commercial actors and actresses from like say Oscar movies. We have really veered away from that this particular season. We have not had a ton of Oscar nominated performers. We had Ariana DeBose, and so it feels really fun. It feels just like we're doing something different than usual. And I know he's done a couple of stand-up specials on HBO, and then he has another one coming out soon. He works a lot with Bo Burnham. Bo has directed some of his work and is directing this upcoming special. So that I just love Bo Burnham, and so for us to have some Bo Burnham adjacent content on SNL is really exciting to me. And he also has the NBC connection. He did the Carmichael show from 2015 to 2017, which was a semi-autobiographical show about him.
Do you know anybody that's watched the Carmichael show, by the way? Because I did know about this show while it was on. I believe it had, let me get this right. It had 3 seasons, 32 episodes. I don't know one person that watched the Carmichael show.
Me neither.
In the chat. If you did, please let me know, because
let us know.
I've heard of Jared Carmichael, and I've heard of the Carmichael show. Obviously, he still has good relationships with NBC. It's been, 5 or 6 or 7 years that they would bring him back. But it was an interesting choice because I think he was one of the lesser known names that we could have gotten. Very interesting. Mike, any thoughts on Jared Carmichael hosting SNL?
I think it's Gerard, right?
Is it Gerard? Okay, I'm sorry.
Gerard
Carmichael. I just spent 5 minutes talking about Jared, but Gerard, thank you. Yeah.
Anyway, mazel tov to him.
Mike, you could have interrupted
me. Yeah, I think he's hosting right around his 35th birthday too. So, and Lizzo her birthday's right near there too.
Yes.
But no, I've heard of him. I've seen some of his stand-up. I've never really seen him act.
Okay. Yeah. Monette in the chat, Casey's mom in the chat, not Stacey's mom, Casey's mom said that she watched the Carmichael show. So interesting. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to expect from the Gerard Carmichael episode, but I think this will be fun. Nicole Gunna previously appeared on SNL with Young Thug earlier in the season. So going in more of a hip hop direction after we had Roddy Ricch, who was supposed to be on the show earlier this season, and then he got canceled due to COVID restrictions and stuff like that. So going back to the hip hop vein. Any thoughts on Gunna?
Yeah, I'm excited. We've had a few people now who have cameoed in the season and then either been host or musical guest with Oscar Isaac. Charlie XCX is some version of that. We could find a loophole to loop her into that category too. So it's fun when somebody has that. They appear on the show and then clearly makes a good impression, gets to know people behind the scenes, and then they're brought back in a larger capacity. That's what I'm holding out for Nicholas Braun, who cameoed in that same episode that Oscar Isaac did in What Up With That, with the Jason show. Had to put that out there. I need to see Nicholas Braun host. Anyway, I'm excited. Gunna has had so many like really big viral hits on his album that premiered a couple months ago, and so it's really, I'm just excited to see him kind of in his own right, and a lot of his songs are a lot of collaborations, so I would guess we're going to see some other people, which is just always fun when the musical guest brings on recognizable faces to work with them that they collaborated on songs together. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. I'm just I'm reading more about the Carmichael show. There were some previous hosts that Gerard Carmichael worked with. So maybe he'll get some advice from them from his time at the Carmichael show. But Tiffany Haddish was on the Carmichael show. So that's somebody who's recently hosted SNL in the last few years. David Alan Grier was on the Carmichael show, hosted twice in the 90s. One of my favorite mid-90s hosts. So that'll be fun. There are some SNL connections there. Okay. So that is our first show in April. Let's flash forward to April 9th when we have host Jake Gyllenhaal and musical guest Camila Cabello. So this to me is fascinating to talk about because Jake Gyllenhaal was obviously the subject of a lot happening in the fall when it came to Taylor Swift and All Too Well, and everybody was putting the red scarves and wearing them and talking about this.
Including you.
So, including me.
John,
so we'll see
if fueled some rumors that he was involved in the controversy, that we're saying it's Jake Gyllenhaal. It could be John that song was about. Like, John's fueling those rumors himself. Didn't come from me.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just an agent of chaos in terms of what's happening with Jake Gyllenhaal. But yeah, it will be fun. We'll see if the red scarf will make an appearance on one of the podcasts that week. We don't know. But yeah, will be very, very interesting, Nicole, to see what the fan reaction is to Jake Gyllenhaal, who has previously hosted the show, by the way. He actually did have a very good hosting appearance back during, was it 2007? So they're like right in the middle of a lot of people's primes. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, Mike, let me ask you, do you remember anything from that previous Jake Gyllenhaal episode?
I think he was promoting Zodiac, if I remember correctly.
Or Love and Other Drugs was around then, too.
Around that era.
Yeah,
I love that movie. Oh, my gosh.
I would be remiss on the Numbers podcast and not point out that he's hosting, he said April 9th?
Yes.
All right, so 4 + 9 is 13. That's Taylor's number, so just saying that.
Oh, my God.
Oh!
Wow.
Wait, dude.
Do you think they did that on purpose? Somebody.
Dude.
This is an audio podcast. Do you think we did this on purpose?
People on video see my jaw's on the floor right now. It has to be on purpose. Yes, something in there.
Taylor was the guest on the 13th of November.
Right.
Oh my gosh, this is just.
I'm freaking out.
So much happening here. Okay, so
this is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, Nicole, people know who Jake Gyllenhaal is. I don't think you need, obviously, another Marvel host coming in. We don't need to get into too much about him, but you think, so for this one, I'm pretty sure that people will be very interested in their televisions about what they're going to see. You agree?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, and I just looked up Love and Other Drugs was 2010, so a little bit after his first hosting round. But one of my, honestly, I'm embarrassed to say this, but probably like top 10 or 20 SNL, top 10 to 15 all-time SNL moments for me was Jake Gyllenhaal in Airport Sushi doing Defying Gravity. That I rewatch that constantly, like once a week for the last 2 years. It's one of my favorite things in the world. I love it. And so he's really, everything he's done on SNL has been really good. And I'm freaking out about the 4 + 9 situation. I think he's going to be really good. And it's also, he was so quiet for a while. I'm sure everyone around him was like, just don't say anything. And now he has a lot of projects coming up. So it feels like he just has to kind of bite the bullet and be like, okay, I have to just move past that and not avoid press. I have to lean into press now. And so he was very quiet, and now a lot of his stuff is coming out all at once. So he has to do this. And then as for Camila Cabello, it's like Taylor and her have had a longstanding friendship in the industry. And so, you know, it feels very like Monette, who's in the chat right now, had a funny tweet today that was like, it's like a playing both sides kind of thing. And I completely agree. And I'm always interested in those types of producer decisions when you have a host and musical guests that are two different sides of, say, a conflict, so to speak, even though I don't really think it's a conflict on the inside. Like, I think Taylor and Jake are both more over it than maybe they let on.
Yeah, I saw Camila open for Taylor on the Reputation tour.
Yep.
So she was obviously friends with her, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And Charlie XCX.
Oh, okay. So it all comes together. As the press release says, Jake Gyllenhaal will host SNL for the second time on April 9th. The Academy Award-nominated actor next stars in Ambulance, coming to theaters April 8th. Camila Cabello will make her second appearance as SNL musical guest, previously in season 45. The Grammy-nominated artist's highly anticipated new album, Familia, will be released on April 8th. Okay, next up on April 16th, we have host and musical guest Lizzo pulling double duty here. As the press release says, Lizzo will pull double duty when she takes the stage for her SNL hosting debut and second musical guest appearance on April 16th. I believe she was previously on the Eddie Murphy episode back in season 45. The Grammy winner stars in the competition series Watch Out for the Big Girls, premiering March 25th on Prime Video. In addition to the live broadcast, SNL will stream the remainder of the season live on Peacock. Okay, so Lizzo was the one that I believe was rumored to be coming in. So this will be a very exciting time. Obviously, we had Billie Eilish pulling double duty earlier in the season. Now we have Lizzo. So Nicole, thoughts on Lizzo being the host and musical guest on April 16th?
Oh, I'm so excited. And we obviously have talked quite a bit about how there have been more men hosting than women, but then also way more women as musical guests than men. And I'm really happy that both of the double duty hosts that we've seen as of April are women. And it's it's really just awesome. And I think the end of the season is kind of evening things out a little bit more. We're seeing more women host, and also still a lot of women in the musical guest capacity. And so I thought Billy did a great job. I think Lizzo will do a great job. And it was that the Eddie Murphy episode was just like one for the freaking books. That was kind of the best episode to be a musical guest on, because more people tuned in for that and were smiling about that than like any other episode probably for in years. How many people were just so happy that whole night. And so her pre-tape with 80, I would love to see a part 2, or I would just love to see them do something else together. That was like such a huge highlight of that whole season, probably like top 5 sketches for me of that season. And I think she's so funny on social media. She has such a huge like just her presence on everything she does is so vibrant and amazing. Like whether it's on social media, or she is doing these new projects with like, you know, hosting stuff, reality stuff. She just is like veering into a lot of different roles, and I think it's the perfect time for her to host SNL, because she's proving that she's more than, you know, a musician. She's doing all these different things, and I'm just such a huge fan of hers.
Yeah, it really feels like a no-brainer. Like, it just feels like Lizzo is like so in the zeitgeist now. People seem to love everything that she's doing, and she really like stands for like a lot of really great things. So it seems like a no-brainer, something that they definitely should have done. And I am excited to see Lizzo host SNL. Mike, let me get your thoughts on Lizzo coming in for double duty on April 16th.
That's the one I think I'm most excited about of those 3 announcements. Of all 6, if you count the musical guests too. I think her Truth Hurts performance and season 45 is probably my favorite musical performance of that season. That was a really cool one that I remember. And for season 47, I think she's the 47th double duty host. So there you go.
Oh, okay. Very nice.
There you go.
Okay, so that should be very fun. We came here tonight for the By the Numbers show, so we're going to get into that. Mike, can I ask you to do me a quick favor?
Sure.
Can you just tell the listeners, fill the air for me, tell the listeners what they can expect to hear in the rest of the show in terms of what we're going to look at from a numbers perspective. I just have to drop out and come back in so I can try and share my screen, because I'm having a little bit of technical issues with that. So just if you could fill them in, and then I'll be right back.
Sure, that's a pretty tall task, but I'll try. Nicole can help me out too.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of this is predicated on this stat that I invented called the power ranking, and it's basically the ultimate SNL stat. If you follow sports at all and know what WAR is, it's like a one singular number to assess impact. That's like WAR stat. In SNL, I have this one called power ranking, and it's a single score for an episode that combines screen time and appearances. We weight them, we combine them. Tons of math is involved, and they get one number for that episode. So that's, it's cool for one episode, but the best thing is that now we have like over 50 episodes of data to go on. So now we can just manipulate it like crazy and come up with a lot of stats. So I think, Nicole, you were a big fan of this, so maybe you can help me out to explain. I always do a bad job explaining what the power ranking is.
Please don't
you understand it, so
don't say that. No, you do a great job, and you're so humble. Like I call it, when in my head I call it like MPR, Mike's Power Rankings. I like to include the M, because this is Mike's genius invention. So it's not just Power Rankings, it's Mike's Power Rankings, MPR. And it's a really cool metric that the more we talk about it, the more, as you said, context we have around it. So we can, our conversations can get more and more, just have more implications and things underneath that we're talking about. And it's fun to compare this metric to pure screen time, to screen time over seasons and over episodes. And it's just, the more we do this, the more fun it is. And like, everything that you bring to this is just so smart and fun and creative, and also the community around it too. Like everyone in the chat right now, everybody listening on audio, the more we all talk about this, I feel like the more ideas you have, Mike, to create around it. And like, I know if anyone ever has questions, they're like, hey, could you try showing us this data, or like this in terms of that, it's like we love that stuff. So as always, like in the chat or message us, and chances are like Mike, if you're wondering about something, Mike probably can answer your question.
Appreciate the love.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I fixed our little issue, so we are good to go. Let's get into the numbers. Did we cover everything? We're ready to go?
Yes.
All right. All right, let's do it. Let's start with our power rankings that we have for this season, and I will bring those up on screen for all of you. Okay. There we go. All right, so I will zoom in just to make sure that everybody can see the latest power rankings from the first 15 episodes of the season. Let's start with number 1. Holding the top spot in the power rankings is Kenan Thompson at 87.18. Dropping down to number 2 is Colin Jost at 67.67. 80 Bryant comes in at number 3, 66.08. We have Cecily Strong at 61.05. Chris Redd at 58.31 in 5th place. Ego Wodem in 6th at 57.98. We have then Kate McKinnon, who comes in at 7th in the rankings, 57.46. James Austin Johnson, JAJ, coming in at 53.7 in 8th place. Che is in 9th, 53.6. Moffat is in 10th, 52.62. And then we'll stop there. We'll stop with our top 10 just to talk about the 10 that we have in the first half of the rankings. Nicole, any surprises for the first half of our rankings?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Kate has missed almost half the episode, 7 out of 15 so far. So to see that she is just climbing right back to the spot that we recognize her at, at the very top is, I think comes as no surprise, but it still is just really kind of startling almost that one cast member can climb up so quickly after missing so much. And then, I mean, Keenan's lead on this, we're going to talk about hosts as well. And like, Keenan's kind of starting to look like how Jason looks on the host equivalent to this. Like, he is just like climbing up, and it's reflective of his consistency and dedication. It's just episode after episode. He just is always delivering and always in all different types of ways across every episode. And then my last point I want to bring up is Colin Jost being in 2nd feels really interesting to me. Usually he's up there. He's never at the bottom, but I think it's pretty rare for him to be number 2. And I think that makes sense, as we've talked about, in a season where it's encouraged and certainly acceptable to be off for a few episodes. If you're filming a different project, it makes sense that a lot of the other players who are in a lot of sketches, whereas Colin is just on update pretty much with a few exceptions, it makes sense that those people are kind of canceling each other out a little bit and leaving Colin to take that second place spot. In any other season where people weren't coming in and out like they are this season, like they are in the recent seasons, I think it would just, Colin would be at like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, but number 2 is just it's interesting to me.
I love that Chris Redd is in 5th place. I think that's awesome. I think he's having a great season, and you're starting to see it in the numbers and the stats. I think that's wonderful. This top 10 is a really, really good cast. I mean, if this top 10 was the cast, this would be really, really fun to see. What I would love to know from you, Mike, is can you give me a sell high candidate? So if somebody doesn't know what that is, that's a little bit of a sports term where if somebody, or a stock term really, where if, someone is like higher up and you think they're going to go down, now is the time to sell on them if you don't think they're going to be in the top 10 of the rankings coming up. So Mike, do you have a sell high candidate?
For the last 6 or for next season?
For the final 6. So when we get to the end of the season, give me maybe one person in the top 10 who you think won't be there at the end of the season.
Won't be there? I don't know. I mean, I guess I would say JAJ because he's the rookie. I think all the vets will just probably have like a huge, like we thought last year, like a big send off. I was going to say Cecily because if you're going for next season, because but for the last 6, I imagine you're going to get, even if they come back again in season 48, I think you're going to get a lot of Kate, 80, and Cecily, and Kanan's going to stay in the top no matter what. So I guess I would say also like Chris and Ego, as we'll look at later, like they're kind of going to be in everything. So I don't think they're going to go anywhere, but maybe JJ or at, what is he at 8? And then Moffat at 10. They're a little more vulnerable down there.
Yeah, I do have to say, I think JJ, who's having just a fantastic season, in 8th place, might drop down below 10th, I would say, because that the disparity between JJ in 8th, Che in 9th, and then Moffat, they're all within 1 point of each other. Then, as we get into our bottom 10, which we'll read, those people are pretty close. So I definitely think that he's probably the sell high candidate at this point, even though I think it's very impressive what he's been doing in his first season for sure. Let's go to the bottom half of our rankings right now. And very interesting that we'll talk about the ones that are above average. Our average ranking is 48.63. So the two that are above average are in 11th and 12th place. And that's Mikey Day at 51.74. And then we have Heidi Gardner at 48.97 in 12th place. The rest are the under average for the season. Kyle Mooney at 44.04. Then we have Andrew Dismukes in 14th at 43.85. Bowen Yang in 15th at 43.08. Pete Davidson coming in 16th at 41.93. Chloe Fineman at 38.34 in 17th. Then we drop to Sarah Sherman in 18th place, 28.31. Melissa Villasenor in 19th at 26.97. Punky in 20th at 23.44. And then finally, Aristotle in 21st at 15.02. All right, Nicole, what stands out to you here in the bottom half of our rankings?
I mean, the obvious thing that is upsetting is Aristotle he hasn't had nearly enough shine throughout, enough opportunities, but I think we've seen that disparity grow in the latter half this past spring. This definitely looks a lot different than the last time we analyzed it. So it's definitely disappointing, but again, it's a huge cast. So it makes sense that for a first year to have a season like this, it's definitely not unheard of for just a large cast like this. And if anything, it's amazing that the other first years have been able to get on what they have and shown themselves as much as they have. So I think if anything, it's more like a testament to how much JAJ and Sarah have been able to do, more so than even that Aristotle isn't doing enough. I feel like it's obviously such a competitive environment to just in terms of time. There's only so much time on each episode, and it's a lot about luck and chance and who you're writing with and what you're doing. JAJ being in he's pretty much every cold open. He's the most critical character, Trump or Biden. And then Sarah and her relationship with Please Don't Destroy has been awesome for her. And so Aristotle, I think, needs to kind of find something like that in order for him to grow, keep rising up. And for a first year in a large cast, yeah, I think you need something like that is going to be a consistency. So that's really the main thing I wanted to just bring up about this bottom half.
For sure. Mike, we do have a question from our friend, College Movie Geek in the chat, who asks if Pete has dropped a lot because of not being there the last few weeks. So do you want to direct that question and then, or direct your answer to that question, as well as tell me what potentially stands out to you here in the bottom half of our rankings?
Sure. Yeah. To answer the question, yeah, Pete put up 3 zeros. So his just average over 15, add in 3 zeros, you're going to drop. So yeah, that's why he's down there. Stand out to me, I think that I really like where Dismukes is headed. He's for a sophomore, he's solid middle of the pack. I mean, you look at Kyle, Heidi, and Bowen around him, who are more senior members of the cast. So I think he's going to continue to go up, and maybe he'll be at a 49-50 by the end of the year. I think he's doing well, unless what I said earlier comes true, which is that it's just dominated by Kate, Cecily, Keenan, 80 at the end, and we don't see them because Dismukes has plenty of time to shine in the next few years. I would just point out this season, I think we went in and we kind of forgot about this, but this is Melissa's season to, do something. Then,
did we say that?
Well, people kept saying that to me after the By the Numbers shows last year. Aristotle has taken Melissa's shine of the, underdog.
The underdog,
so
yeah.
People aren't saying it enough, or anymore, I should say. But
okay.
you can't have Sarah ahead of Melissa. And I was looking at all the appearances, and I'm like, everyone's like, oh, well, Melissa's the impressionist, so she doesn't really get into things. Melissa has done one impression the entire season. I was like, that's fascinating. It was she did Kristen Wiig in Celeb School.
I was going to say, is her impression of somebody who's not on the show?
Yeah.
But
not making an impression in the show, but she did one.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
Her impression of a ghost.
brutal.
Okay. Well, my question, I asked you for the sell high. All right, give me a buy low. What's the buy low here that if you're going to invest in one of these people to move up significantly by the end of the season, who would you pick, Mike?
Obvious is Pete, so I have to say that because I have to be true to the numbers. So Pete will go up. But then I'll say just for percentage wise, I'll say Sarah, just because at 28, I think she can get to like a 33.
But if she got to a 33, does that move her up any ranking positions? Because there's such a gap between Chloe at 38 and Sarah at 28.
Very true. I always think percentage wise, but you're absolutely right. So I would say I'd probably say Bowen. Bowen could jump up. I think Bowen's
Right.
like the biggest new star on the show, so he could jump
Okay.
up. You know, he's such a tight race with. I know Pete, he'll move, but Dismukes, Kyle, so he can jump up.
All right, Nicole, give me a buy low.
Yeah, it feels like in this one it is, and people are saying in the chat that this whole list, particularly on the bottom, it's a lot of these people are pursuing outside opportunities, and not just in the sense of they're gone for weeks at a time, but in the sense of they're not, they have other priorities going on in a week where they're so quote 100% at SNL. They also are like maybe they're reading scripts or they're practicing lines for something else. So that I think is a good thing. We talk about you want to be high on the numbers, but you also want to be setting yourself up for success beyond the show. And all of that said, I'm going to agree. I think Sarah is going to go up. And then in terms of rankings, I just think that how we see these four at the end, Sarah, Melissa, Punky, Aristotle, I think Sarah might still be fourth to last when we revisit this, but I think she's going to get a big edge up on the following three people. I think we're going to really start to see that grow. And for her and Chloe, I feel like, and even up to the Pete, Bowen, Dismukes, I feel like all those people are going to really even out.
Yeah, I wouldn't say like look, if we're talking buy low to like crack the top 10, I think that it's certainly possible that somebody like Heidi, I think in 12th place, like certainly can get there. I mean, that's I think a little bit of an easy answer. But or even Dismukes, who's in 14th, he's not far off. I guess 10th place is pretty close. I guess okay, so 10th place is at 52.62. So in that case, Heidi's only about 4 off or 3.5 off. So she would be pretty close. Andrew Dismukes would be about 10, so that would be tough to crack. But I think as far as a buy low candidate, again, I'll say it again. I think a buy low candidate, if you're going to buy low right now, and I was like, somebody has a lot of money and they want to invest into SNL stocks, I would say buy some Aristotle stock. That's my opinion. It's really risky. You never know. Like this could be it. There could be 6 episodes and that's it. We don't know. But what we're hoping for is like, this is the bottom of the barrel. And then potentially could this be a boost coming up? Because, Melissa obviously has had years to move up the rankings and we just haven't seen it. Punky's been at the bottom of the rankings for 2+ years. I think there's a chance here to potentially buy some Aristotle, and Aristotle could move past Punky and Melissa, maybe fall at the end of the season right below Sarah in 19th place. I think that would be a good spot for him. So that would be my buy low candidate right now. Okay. Yes, Mike.
I was going to say real quick, because I was talking about Dismuke's sophomore year. He was at a 26 average at this point last season. So that's a huge increase. And that's like also shows that Sarah is having a good rookie season because she's 2 points above him.
Yeah, that's
awesome.
That's interesting. Okay, so this is what we like to do. So we give you guys the rankings. Now we're going to tell you what the differences are between last time we spoke and this time we spoke, because maybe you didn't get to the podcast and you should have, but maybe you just don't remember what the rankings were. But I would love to share with all of you the gains and losses since the last time we spoke in the rankings, and who's had the biggest gains in the rankings in terms of percentage and who's had the biggest losses. Okay. So I'm not going to go through the entire list. If you're listening on audio, I'll just kind of give you the top 5 gains and the top 5 or the bottom 5 losses. Okay. So our top 5 is Kate McKinnon, who gained about 15.37 points. Chris Redd gained about 5.49. Cecily Strong, 5.04. 80 Bryant, 3.89. And Keenan Thompson, 2.19. And the bottom 5 who dropped this time were Chloe Fineman, who lost negative 1.87 rankings points. Punky Johnson lost 2.4. Heidi Gardner lost 5.66. Mikey Day lost 6.79. And Pete Davidson lost 10.48. Okay. Mike, did I explain that well? Did I miss anything?
No, you got it. I mean, there's 2 columns. I did one for percentage because, if you were at a 20 and then you're up a 30, obviously that's a huge percentage, but 10 points might not be as much as, Kate's 15. So this is arranged by actual net gain or net loss. But percentage obviously will follow suit with that. So if you are watching it, I'll post it on Twitter later, but that's what you're seeing here is their full average over 15 episodes, what they were last time we all chatted about this, and what their 3 episodes in isolation were, 13, 14, and 15, and then the 2 gains and losses column. So you got it.
Okay, perfect. Nicole, any gains or losses, chat, that you want to bring up that we haven't already spoken about in the rankings?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'll bring it back up. Chris Redd is just having fully an amazing season, not just the last few episodes, but I think he's just going to continue to grow, to go higher and higher. And we're starting to see him in a lot of different metrics in this circle of people who have all been at the show for 9+ years, and all these things. It's like Keenan, Kate, Adie, Cecily, and Chris are kind of at the top in so many of these things. And so, and Colin. So it's people who've been there twice as long as he has. And he's really quietly, but very consistently and sharply, just moving up the ranks. And he's really just solidifying himself with people who've been there twice as long as he has. And he does it in a very Keenan way. It's he is just so solid and consistent across the board, and everything he's in, he just makes it better. That really is the Keenan effect. And I think Chris Redd has that similar quality, that he just it's not like we feel like there's ever too much of him, because anytime he's in a sketch, he's always making the people around him look better too. So I think he just his potential to go up in all these metrics is just unlimited, and I'm excited to keep watching it.
Yeah. I wouldn't be stunned if, Chris Redd's at 5 right now. I wouldn't be stunned if next season he's in the top 3. I think there's definitely high potential for something like that. Okay, so those are our gains and losses, our risers and fallers for this set of episodes. Next up, we're going to talk about a stat called above average episode rate. And this is a stat that examines how often a cast member has an above average impact on a given episode. So I'm excited to share all that with you right now. And here it is. We have our chart that says percentage of above average episodes. And Mike, can I pass it over to you to explain what we see here on the chart?
Sure. This one I just made up yesterday. I was thinking what is what would you define as a starring episode? How can we measure if you were the star of that episode? And I was, this is our 10th By The Numbers show, as you mentioned. I was thinking back all the way to By The Numbers 1 in its infancy, and
we were children.
Yeah, I know. I was 4, you were 3.
Yeah.
So in Andy Hoagland, SNL in Review on Twitter, check him out, said, "What's the Mendoza line?" Because we were using a lot of baseball terminology, and I was like, what do you want to be above for an episode? And I just threw out 60. I had a lot less data back then, a year and a half ago. And I was like, and so then I actually figured it out. And I was like, all right, I was actually pretty dead on back then. It's I ended up being about 59 is the average score for anyone in any episode. Then I was like, well, let me take out Jost and Shay because they have such a solidified role, and I want to just remove them from the equation. What is the average for anyone, including the zeros, including the highs? And it ended up being about 52. So I was like, all right, so if it's any given week and you get above a 52 in that show, that's a great episode for you, whether it's 100 or whether it's 53. You're not getting lost in the shuffle. So I took everyone's episodes from their highs and lows and figured out how many of those episodes were a good episode for you. So
got it.
That's what we're looking at here.
Yeah, so it's basically showing the percentages, and Mike divided it into the green zone, the yellow zone, and the red zone of which people, really star in most of the episodes that they're in, and then who are, star in maybe half the episodes they're in, somewhere between 25% and 46%, and then who, rarely ever stars in the episodes they're in. So let me read this out for our audio listeners. So here are the stars of their episodes the majority of the time. This ranges from 75% to 54.72%. Okay. Keenan, Kate McKinnon, Mikey Day, Beck Bennett, because we're looking back in the last 3 seasons, Adie Bryant, Cecily Strong, Heidi Gardner, and Ego Wodum are all in the green. They're all, more than 54% of their episodes, they have an above average episode ranking. Middle of the pack, James Austin Johnson, who's only been in 15 of these episodes, is about 46.67%. And we're going to range all the way down to about 25%, where we're going to get to Alex Moffat at 45, Kyle at 45, Pete at 41, Chris at 41, Bowen at 26, and Andrew Dismukes at 25. And then these are people who rarely star as in their episodes. And that includes Chloe Fineman, Sarah Sherman, Melissa Villasenor, Lauren Holt, Aristotle Atari, and Punky Johnson. So Chloe at 18, Sarah at 13, Melissa at 13, Lauren at 10, Aristotle at 6, and Punky at 5. All right, Nicole, anything stand out to you over here?
Yeah, I think I would be curious if I were to have blindly made predictions for these, how right I would have been. And it's always fun to think of what we, the intersection of like what we feel versus what the numbers are. Like when you, after an episode being like, this person had an amazing episode. And then you're like, oh, actually, they just really made the most with what they had, or, stuff like that. And so, I mean, Keenan being at the top is not surprising. I think, honestly, I would have guessed he would have been like second or third, just because I feel like he's always so present and he's always doing a ton of things in different ways in each episode. But I feel like he's very rarely like kind of hogging the attention, so to speak. And of course, I don't mean that in a bad way, that some people have a very strong presence when they are starring in a lot. It just, Keenan's, the feeling that you get with Keenan is that he's never taking up too much room in a sketch. And that's why like everyone wants Keenan to stay forever. There's nobody who doesn't feel that way. And so it's surprising to see the numbers reflect him being, the star of the episodes, when the feeling is he is like the heart of the episodes more so than the star of them. He's like, he's creating this environment where everyone is thriving. So it's interesting to see it in these numbers like this. And then
I have questions though.
Yes.
I have questions for Mike, because what I want to understand here, and specifically when we're talking about Kenan Thompson or Kate McKinnon, is does this include episodes that they're absent? Like if the 53 episodes, like in Kate McKinnon missed several episodes at the start of the season, are those part of the 53, Mike?
Yeah, we're looking back on 3 seasons. And I also, while we're in the thick of it, I wanted to say that, like, to explain how you score high on this show, because it's a very important part of what we're talking about tonight, is
Sure.
like being on screen a lot, obviously, being the lead or supporting character in sketches often, saying live from New York in the cold open, being at the top of the show more often than the back of the show, and having recurring characters. So like all of these things, like I said earlier when me and Nicole were, vamping about what the power ranking is, I didn't mention those specific things. So like when you see a Mikey Day or a Kenan Thompson, they score so high because they're in everything. They're like in cold opens. They'll pop up. Kenan's in the monologue. Then like, Mikey Day is in update, or he's like, he's the straight man of a sketch, but he's the lead. Like those things make you score high, where a Chloe Fineman might get one lead and that's it. Like the Inventing Chloe sketch, so she's the lead and she's in a pre-tape. So like gets points for being, prime time lead, all that. She's playing herself, all this, but like doesn't appear the rest of the show. So she might get like a 35 in that episode. So I just want to clarify that, because that's why, you can score high or score low.
Yeah, so that makes sense. But the question, like if I'm a listener and I'm watching this podcast, my biggest question here is like, I've watched every episode of Saturday Night Live the last 3 seasons. You can't tell me that there's 14 episodes that I've seen that Kate McKinnon's in where she's not the star. So if you're telling me that this doesn't include this does include episodes that are not there, then I do understand that, because if we take away the 7 episodes, for example, that Kate McKinnon was not there at the beginning of the season, that's 46 episodes of the last 3 seasons that she's been in. I'm not sure if she's missed anyone else in 45 or 46 that you can remember offhand, Mike, but
I don't think so.
yeah, in which case, like 43 divided by 46 in that case, let me do that math one more time. 43 divided by 46 instead of so that's 93.47% of the episodes that she's really a star in. So I just don't want to mislead anybody. Yeah.
No, totally. I mean, yeah, you don't get credit for she's not gonna get credit for those episodes because she missed them, So she's not in that episode. But
right. So for her to have missed a lot and still be so high is obviously
that's exactly right, Nicole. Is like the fact that she's up there and she posted 7 zeros for, out of all of her career episodes, she posts seven zeros in a row and is still like, second place, which, like John said, great point. Like she would be first if you didn't miss 7 episodes.
Right. Yeah, that is very true. Okay, before we go on to the next one, can we just have this debate that we were having off the podcast on the podcast for a little bit? Because this is directly related to this. Okay, so I stand on one side. I'll just let the listeners know. I stand on one side, Mike stands on the other side, and Nicole stands somewhere in the middle. Okay, that's where we're at right now, which is if we're trying to track historical events, okay, and in terms of SNL. Now, the question is even though Daryl Hammond, or in the past Don Pardo, announces Kate McKinnon, for example, as part of the cast, but she's absent from the episode, should that count as an official episode that they are a part of? So if you're talking about so-and-so's 200th episode as a cast member, if they had missed 7 episodes, is it really their 193rd? Okay, my answer is it's like sports. If you're not there, it should not count as an actual episode that you are a cast member on the show. Mike, I think you disagree with me.
I 100% disagree. And the funny thing is, I used to be you, John. When we did season 1 of By the Numbers last year, I took a lot of heat because I had your mentality. And when I did power rankings, I was dropping those episodes that like Cecily was away filming and she wasn't there. And so I was like, she pops up for like, a pre-tape voice for like the eBay sketch. So like, that's an episode that she's in. But like,
yes.
Meanwhile, she's filming Schmigadoon, So like, I was taking a lot of heat because I was like, oh, okay, well, they're posting up zeros, so they're not the 3rd most impactful cast member this season. But if you remove them, then they are, because when Cecily's there, she is a top 5 cast member. But if you look at the season as a whole, people are like, why is Cecily so high? Like, she's missed so much time. And I'm like, yeah, but when she's there, she's top 5. And so I was like, I came to an epiphany after last season and updated all my data and like went for it. I was like, the real thing that we want to accomplish is just giving all the data. So unfortunately, for debate standpoint, it is a semantics thing. Episodes appeared in versus episode count. And I was like, SNL is a team sport. And if you're in the cast, you're in the cast. So if you get cut a dress, but you're in the building, you could be in Good Nights. You weren't even in that episode.
That's different, though. That's different because if you see them at Good Nights, or or we know as a community that they were there, but they were cut, that's an 0-4. Like, you weren't given anything in the show. But if you are like apps given, and this is something new, right? Like, I just heard John Lovitz talking about this on Fly on the Wall. Like, he left the cast because he wanted to film a movie and he was going to miss 2 episodes. And Lauren was like, no. And this is different. Like, now people like come and go as they please. So if you're not there that week, and we know like Pete Davidson is absent, he's filming his horror movie. Okay. I think as far as the power rankings are concerned, I don't want any consistency here. I think as far as the power rankings are concerned, I agree counting them there because they are officially part of this season's cast. When we're looking at season statistics, I think you count them. When it comes to a cast member's career on the show, I think that is a different story when you're talking about how many episodes episode count. Nicole, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah. Okay. Here's the opinion from the least sports follower person in the panel right now. I don't really follow sports, but I think I am somewhere in the middle because I think that the show is just too fluid at this point. And I mean that in the sense of like, you might not know if you're going to be in the building. So all of these logistics of crediting on, say, IMDb or Wikipedia or whatever, all that kind of stuff, it's not necessarily something that can be like updated, because people, it's like, we don't know. They might not even know themselves if they're going to be in the building until a few days prior. And I think the show just it encourages that right now. It's probably not like even worth the distinction unless it's in a casual way. And also with like Cecily last year, the example that you gave, Mike, even if you're not there, you still want to, if Cecily is the queen of voiceovers, like, and she can get that done from somewhere else, or she can go into 30 Rock for 25 minutes on a Tuesday and get that done. You know, Cecily has that advantage over, say, Kate or somebody else, because Cecily is a large proportion of what she does has always been voiceovers. So if Cecily has to be absent for a week, she still has a very likely chance of being in the show if she pops in to do her voiceover work. A parallel person who, say, is more known for Update or for, I mean, Cecily known for everything, but as somebody who doesn't do voiceovers as much, they're not going to have that same parallel advantage or that parallel neutrality or whatever it would be. So I think it's just like the show is just too encouraging of people coming and going as they please for us to disregard that. So I think it has to be, and my other point on it is, I think we are celebrating just like career lengths in some sense. Like, we want to talk about career impact, but also just the sense of being on the show for however long and being a cast member in that stretch of time and for that stretch of time in itself is an accomplishment. And so I know that it affects the rankings and stuff, but those are kind of my thoughts as a non-sports person, my just intuition about it.
And let me just throw one other thing out there. Daryl Hammond shouldn't be announcing people who were not in the building that week. That is, like, I know it's something that's been done in the past.
That's a wreck. That's a wreck logistically. The show.
What are you doing? So some 5-year-old kids watching Saturday Night Live. Oh, maybe not, but some kids watching Saturday Night Live, and he hears Kate McKinnon, and she's not even there. So why are you announcing this? I think it's just. I don't think stupid.
The 5-year-old is going to realize one way or the other with all the wigs and everyone. Like no.
You know how crazy that sounds, John.
Kristen wigs. Yeah.
Imagine Lauren.
Yeah, no one. Only people like us would be like, oh no, one person that was mentioned in the intro montage wasn't there. Oh, I'm so sad. Like, people don't know. There are too many wigs on this show for people to know.
All right. So from now on, when I introduce the SNL Network podcast, I'll say TJ Randolph, Bill Kenny, Sammy K, even when they're not on the podcast. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay, please. That's way different. This is different.
The thing.
All right.
I like that you're heated up about it, but it's very different.
John, imagine it's interesting Lauren walking up to Daryl Hammond and be like, Daryl, Melissa is not on Update tonight. Do not say her name.
Wait, no, if she's cut from Update, that's so different. But if she's not,
so she's that's a zero for her.
The 5-year-old has the same reaction. The 5-year-old in question has the same reaction if she gets cut versus if she's not. And I know you're going to say, but what about goodnights? The 5-year-old is sleeping by goodnights. The 5-year-old is not evaluating goodnights or pausing the screen to look for the heads and say, oh, that's the one with the dark hair that was what I didn't see this episode, but I saw last episode. Okay, I'm more on Team Mike for this one, it seems.
All right. Well, this is gonna be a debate for a long time. So
John, real quick question though, like, Emily Prager's career on SNL, like as a cast member, what was her episode count?
0, right? Because that I have my pen in my hand, but right, it's 0 because that is.
She was a writer before that and popped up and stuff, but she was a net like she's a real cast member. Can you be a real cast member and have 0 episodes?
Okay, well, look, like Denny Dillon was a cast member in season 6, but she appeared in season 1, I think episode 3 or 4 or 5, one of those. She wasn't a cast member when she appeared in season 1. So I think on a season where you're a cast member, when you're announced as a cast member, it doesn't have to be necessarily on the show, could be press releases, whatever it is. When the show considers you a cast member, it's paying you to be a cast member that season. I have no problem with if you're being like in terms of the power rankings, looking at the season as a whole and evaluating these things. I think when it comes to people people online posting congratulations so-and-so on your 100th episode at the show. If you weren't in the show, you're not being credited for the episode. So that's where I'm going from.
Just saying, what's the difference between Emily Prager and Shane Gillis? Emily Prager was announced as a cast member. They were both hired to be them, but Shane Gillis never appeared in an episode. Emily Prager was announced and was just never showed up, and then she was gone because the season ended early. So Emily Prager's episode count as a guest member is 1.
Okay, well, we have to settle this somehow, so we'll try and get it.
We'll keep talking. We'll keep talking. It'll come back up.
All right.
Love the passion, though.
Yeah. What's next on our list?
Anyway.
Oh yeah. Okay. So I wanted to know. This is the biggest question that I've had in a while. Was when there's a woman hosting the show, what happens with the male cast and the female cast? And when there's a man hosting the show, what happens with the male cast and the female cast? Like, how does it change the way that the show interacts between the cast and the host? Okay, so we have 2 charts coming up. We're going to bring them up. We're going to talk about what happens when a woman hosts a show and a man hosts a show and how that affects cast overall screen time and numbers. So let's start with the women hosting the show. We'll do that. Okay. Here are all the episodes when this is the female cast when excuse me about that. This is the women cast when a man hosts the show. So Mike, would you mind just jumping in here and explaining how this is going to work?
Sorry, there's a misunderstanding.
Yeah. I just want to make sure this is clear. Yeah.
These are episodes where women outscored the men in the cast. So,
all right, let's take this over from the top.
Yeah.
Explain exactly what we're doing here.
Yeah, so I was curious. Fair enough. I was curious looking back at all this data that I have is, if there was a correlation between the host and, if the men or women of the cast scored differently. And then I was looking at all right, well, what are the episodes that we can look at that the women did outscore the men because they have been, season 45, there was 8 men and 7 women. Season 46, there was 9 men, 9 women. Season 47, there's 10 men, 9 women. That does not include Jost and Jay. So I was like, all right, so there's always been more men, if not, or the same as the women in the cast. So I was like, I took the episodes that women outscored the men, and that's what we're seeing here on the screen. So these are all the hosts that have hosted episodes that women have outscored the men in the cast. And so I figured, who better to look at it and say, any common denominator? But I did get your number, John, which is that of these 20 episodes that were that women outscored the men, 5 of them had female hosts, and 15 had male hosts. So we take a look at that, but obviously men out-host women so much more that no matter what, there's going to be disparity on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so basically what we're looking at, so I get this now. So we're basically looking when the women on the cast did better versus the men and which episodes that happened, and then we'll look at the vice versa. Okay, got it. Nicole, anything stand out to you here as far as you can maybe make some connections between certain hosts and why the women on the cast would outperform the men in this case?
Yes. Okay. So I'm just going to reiterate it. So if we all 3 of us are going to say it in different terms. So by the time I finish saying it, then one of the 3 of us will have made sense for people. Because this one is more different and interesting. So, okay. So it's sorted from the top. It's the episodes in the last few years where the female cast outperformed the male cast by the largest amount.
Correct.
Right, in terms of screen time. So and collective,
all collectively the whole stat.
Right. So the power ranking perspective.
Yeah.
So from a power ranking perspective, the collective women on the cast outperformed the men on the cast by the highest margin. Okay, so from the top, Timothée Chalamet. It's giving feminism for him to be so high on this list. I think he's a feminist. I'm just going to say that. 318.65. He is at the top of his game in terms of empowering women around him. It's also crazy because his episode had so much Pete Davidson. It felt like that episode was like a Timothy and Pete. It was the Timothy and Pete show. They were together, boom, 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 all over the place. And I guess that means maybe because Pete was paired with Timothy so much, that took away from the women, like, or sorry, from the men. Like every time Timothy was paired with a dude, it was Pete. And so I think when you
That's
have
such a good
those
point.
types of,
You always
when you
think
have
of these
those,
things I don't think of.
you think of a lot of things I don't think of, but that's very nice of you to say. So that's a theme I think we're going to see in other people on this list, is when someone is consistently paired with the same person of, you know, whichever gender, any gender, then maybe other people of the other gender, because everyone on this cast identifies publicly as one of these two genders. So I'm going to, for the purposes of this, I will use, you know, a binary two end way of speaking about it. So it means if someone is paired consistently with the same person, then people of the opposite gender are going to benefit from that, because it means all of these roles that are you know, say it's like a buddy two dudes, or it's a guy and a girl, whichever one it is, like the opposite gender is going to benefit from that. So that's really interesting here with Timothy Chalamet, little feminist king up there. Not surprising. Anya
I
Taylor
have a
Joy is
question.
number 3. Yes.
Adele's last name is Adkins.
Yeah, sorry I didn't change that. It came from my host chart.
Yeah, I did not know this. Sorry, Nicole. Did you want to
Copy and pasted that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So technical though. I like it. Anya Taylor Joy is so Daniel Craig was number 2. We could come back to it. I just want to talk about the ones that I feel like talking about, but good for him. Feminist too, I suppose. Number 3 is I want to talk about Anya Taylor Joy. It's such a fun, happy episode. There's just the best vibes. I think everybody was a little bit skeptical. It wasn't, you know, for a finale, it wasn't someone we were expecting necessarily. And then she just like killed it, blew it out, like knocked it out of the park. And, you know, all these different sports metaphors I'm picking up on, but you know, she was amazing. And it showcased a lot of the women on the cast, like a lot of big empowering moments, like a lot of Kate, 80 Cecily, a lot of everybody. So I like that. And then the last one I'll point out is Billie Eilish is pretty high up here. And I think that's a case, kind of the like inverse, or maybe the converse, some sort of flipped version of what I was saying with Timothy, is if you are paired with someone, the same person a lot of times, then, you know, that gender can go up. So with Billie Eilish, she was paired with Kate so much. So Kate had an amazing, you know, NPR ranking, and then also other women did too. But it took, if one person has an amazing episode, then like, and Kate was just, she was back and like, you know, had crazy numbers from that episode. So it makes sense in both of those cases. That's my main takeaway in short, is like when the host is paired with someone, the implications for that can go in direction of these like kind of extremes.
So, Mike, what I care about when it comes to this stuff is if I'm your casual SNL fan and I see that the new announcement is Gerard Carmichael coming up, and then Jake Gyllenhaal, and then Lizzo, I'm like, okay, we have 2 male hosts, then we have Lizzo coming in for double duty. Like, am I thinking, okay, how are the men in the cast going to do with a host like Lizzo versus a host like Gyllenhaal? Like, do you have any takeaways? And I'll bring up the opposite, that when the men outperform the women on the cast while you have this discussion. But in your research, have you had any takeaways at all from any of the episodes, any parallels that you see as well?
Well, I was trying to look at some microcosms of, like, I was looking at the Chalamet rundown and the Daniel Craig rundown and see like what was there. But to answer your question, it's like, I mean, I guess if you're a female cast member, you'd rather have a man host the show. So I think that's statistical to take away. And that's what's fun about these numbers, is that we can look at them and draw so many conclusions. And that's why the show is so great that we do. But like, you know, for that, it's more even for the men when they like look at this chart you just put on the screen, John. It's like, you know, the gender it's 10 to 20. So that's, you know, 1/3 to 2/3, where for the female driven episodes in the cast, it was they did better with men hosting, more so than the men did when men hosted, because as I mentioned earlier, obviously men host the show a lot more often, so the numbers are going to be in that favor either way.
Got it. Okay, so some of the episodes that we see here when the men actually outperformed the women of the cast on the show, in terms of the top episodes, from this season, we have Rami Malek. Then you have Dan Levy from last season, Ariana DeBose from this season, Kristen Wiig from last season. From 45, you have J.J. Watts, Scarlett Johansson, John Mulaney's 45 episode. So some interesting episodes here. Anything, Nicole, you see here from when the men outperform the women?
Yeah, this feels like very all across the board for me. I mean, of course, the proportion of women to men in terms of hosts is higher, as you said. So when a woman is hosting, maybe you're not gonna. I think we talked a lot about the broy vibes. I don't know who was the first person to overuse that word on the podcast. I don't think it was me, but someone did it, and then I joined in, and we couldn't stop saying it all fall. But I think we talked a lot about that theme of there being a lot of broy sketches, like that bathroom one that I know John just loved, or the man park.
Are you calling me a bro?
Also, I am calling you a bro. That's exactly it. Yeah, you love. Oh my gosh, you just like couldn't stop talking about that one. Like that humor. It was funny to watch.
It was
You
great.
loved that one. I know. I'm happy for you. I really, you deserve to love a sketch like you love that sketch. But yeah, so like the man park, that bathroom one, there were a lot of like broy sketches that were just like, it felt like almost every dude around who was there like was in these sketches and very broy vibes, and then like one or two women maybe were in them.
Nicole, how could you forget this?
Yeah.
I killed a man in 2012.
What a moment.
It was a great moment. Yeah. Thank you for having that right there for me. See, it's easy for you to say, how could I forget? You have it right there, the buttons. You make it it's easy for you. I need to get myself one of those so I can out button your
That's
button
a disaster
machine.
waiting to happen.
It would be a mess, but I think I have to get one for myself too. Anyway, but then with the women, we don't have as many of those, like, female empowerment, whatever you want to call it, equivalents to like the broy ones. So when women are hosting, it doesn't mean necessarily we're going to get as many of those like women empowerment sketches as we do the men empowerment ones. So it's just interesting, like when Kristen Wiig hosted, like, or when Scarlett Johansson or Ariana DeBose, it's just like it's the woman role, so to speak, is covered, and then all of the men, if it's a sketch that has more men written into it than women, even if by a small margin, having a woman as a host is going to affect the women, the rankings more so. So it's interesting. It definitely.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna scroll. Yeah, I mean, definitely what stands out the most is the proportion of women hosts to men hosts is higher than it is than on the other one, for sure.
For sure. All right. So this is an interesting discussion. We'll keep having these discussions as we go. And as we talk on the podcast about the different types of hosts, we can get into this a little bit more. Next up, we have a chart called Cast Synergy. Mike, do you want to explain what's coming up next?
Yeah, this one's been a long time coming. It was Nicole's idea. I took like a year to make my database with all the numbers in it in one place. And so I just finished it like this week. And so I was able to do it like easily, where before it would have been difficult to cross-examine all these. So right here is, you have a list of all the current cast members without Jost and Shay, because their role is on the update desk primarily. So how many appearances they've had this season, and the person they've shared their segments with the most. So at the top, I named it, what cast member appears in the same sketch most often, which ones. And then how many times they appear with that partner or partners, and then percentage of their appearances have been with that person. So I was like, obviously, if you did just a big number stat, it would be like, of course, like you would expect Keenan with everyone because he's appeared the most. But I was like, if you took everyone's appearances this season and then look who was in the same segment, big or small, how often, what are the chances that, I guess a way you could phrase it is, who is most likely to show up in a segment that they're in? That's probably the best way to say it. So like at the top,
Can you give us an example?
Absolutely. So like the top of this chart is Punky, who is very low in appearances. He's at 23 appearances this season. But if Punky's in a segment, there's a 69.6% chance that Keenan's also going to be in that segment. So I figured I'd crunch those numbers and see, who is most often paired up with them, not directly paired with them, but shows up in their segments the most.
That's very interesting because if one of the big questions we did have was who's Kyle Mooney's new Beck Bennett, and in this chart you can clearly see it's Mikey Day. So that's really fascinating. That's like one of the long questions we've had the entire season. But
and that's
let's
why
talk
he
about
wants
the
to kill
partners.
Mikey, I guess.
Yes, exactly. Let's talk about the partners, the people that we see often paired up in sketches. So this is a fascinating chart, Mike. So I love this, and Nicole, credit to you for coming up with this concept. But basically, whenever Alex Moffat's in a sketch, 61% of the time you're going to see JAJ in that sketch as well. For Aristotle, 60% of the time you're going to see one of Dismukes, Chris Redd, JJ, or Sarah. For Sarah, about 60% of the time you're going to see Dismukes. Ego, you'll see a lot of Keenan, 59.5% of the time. For JJ, Alex Moffat. Melissa sees a lot of Dismukes and Keenan in her sketches, about 58% of the time. Chloe sees a lot of Chris Redd, 57% of the time. That's an interesting pair that I haven't necessarily thought of. Chris sees a lot of Keenan. Naturally, you would think that, but 56% of the time. Dismukes sees a lot of Heidi. Bowen sees a lot of Dismukes and Chris. Kyle sees Mikey. Pete has a lot with Chris Redd and Cecily Strong. Mikey Day sees a lot of Kyle. Heidi sees Keenan. That's an interesting pairing, about 52% of the time. Kate sees a lot of 80. You would expect that. And Chloe Feynman is an interesting one with Kate McKinnon for 50% of the time. Cecily with Keenan with Chris Redd, and 80 with Kyle Mooney. Okay, Nicole, any pairings here stand out to you?
Yeah, I want to talk about the ones that are the same. So obviously, if someone is in a larger number of segments, then they are. It's like how on like the elementary school playground, it's like, it's not like every set of best friends is going to be each other's best friend. Like some people, more people would call them their best friend than they would call people their best friends, and it's kind of the same thing. Like if someone just has and it's the data equivalent of that. Like if somebody is in a larger number of appearances, then they are going to be someone's person more often than, say someone who has a lower number. Even if they're paired so often with someone, they might not necessarily be that person's person, so to speak, because if that person has more going on in addition to that partnership. So all of that said, the ones I want to just narrow in on are where it is mutual. And obviously where it's mutual are typically, people who are kind of on the top half of the rankings and the screen time and so on. And so one of those would be Alex and JAJ, and for obvious reasons, it's the cold opens. They're like the cold open kings of the season, so it makes sense that they're each other's person. And then another interesting one is Keenan and Chris, right? Yeah, Chris is Keenan's person and Keenan is Chris's person. So that's really cool because they are two of the people who you see on this list the most. For they are both a lot of people's. I'm using Grey's Anatomy terminology now. I graduated from playground terms to Grey's terms, and if you know, Meredith and Christina each other's
we
person.
all know.
So okay, good. So they're a lot of people's person, and they're also each other's person, and that's pretty cool. And then Mikey and Kyle Mikey and Kyle are each other's person too, which I wouldn't have necessarily guessed that, but I guess it makes sense. They're
Who's the pairing on this list that you would say is the least likely you would imagine them being in sketches together?
Oh, good question. I mean, one of the ones that stood out was Kate and Chloe for sure, and I think
that's weird.
I think it's because they, and this was kind of like a meta, like in joke that was acknowledged in the Inventing Chloe sketch. They have a lot of the same roles. Like if a role is available, it's often that the two of them would be both viable candidates for the same types of roles. And so, when in that Inventing Chloe sketch, it was kind of Kate saying like, I want to play this role actually. And so that is kind of interesting. And maybe there are other cases where they're both in the same sketch because somehow they're both playing a similar character or the same character. So that one's interesting.
Yeah, the Dismukes and Heidi one to me is really fascinating. That one is is one I find interesting. Obviously, 80 and Kyle together, who've both been on the show forever, but I cannot think of a specific 80 and Kyle sketch. I guess they just happen to both be written for very often. Mike, any very weird pairings you see?
Sorry, I was looking up the most frequent, just to piggyback off Nicole, which is Chris and Keenan is 28. That's the most pairs. And then Ego and Keenan, 25. Heidi and Keenan at 25. Heidi and Dismukes at 24. So I liked your example, Nicole, of like, that they're not necessarily be each other's, but who appears the most often. And then just on this chart alone, obviously we have Keenan a lot, but we have Chris Redd 5 times on this chart, Dismukes 4 times, and Kyle twice. So I think this is like sneaky, like a great stat that you'd want is someone who plays well with everybody.
Right.
Big or small.
And in which case that would be who? In your, it would be somebody like Keenan, right?
Well, yeah, Keenan for sure, and Heidi for sure.
Yeah.
Keenan, Heidi, Chris, and now Dismukes. People
that's what you call a utility player.
Big time. You know, I was surprised I didn't see Mikey more because I think Mikey, we were talking a lot about who's the next Beck, and we're like, is it Alex? Is it Mikey? And I think it's Chris Redd, and I think it's Dismukes.
Yes.
Right, not a lot of Alex and Mikey stuff that we see on the show as much. So, yeah, this is really fascinating. Would love to explore this one definitely a lot more. Okay. Up next, we have an interesting chart. We're going to talk about, this was a question that we got. This is a cast member that we talked about frequently, especially when it comes to our patron feedback shows and how they compare to a previous year's cast member. We're just going to explore the numbers a little bit, not give too much commentary, but let me give a trigger warning to our friend Monette in the chat. We're going to talk a little bit about Aristotle here for a second, okay? So I'm going to bring up a chart on screen that's going to compare.
Shout out to Monette, who's just an amazing
trooper.
I love, yes.
Yeah,
a trooper for this cause.
Yes. So, Mike, bite the bullet on this one. Let's talk about Aristotle versus Lauren Holt last season.
All right. This is just like I get this question just too often. I was like, we have a show to do, and then we'll probably, maybe do one more next break, and then the final show where we can really look back. But I'm like, we have to address the elephant in the room when people tell me like that, Aristotle won't be back next season. And I'm like, and full disclosure, I don't like to give my opinion too often, but like Angelo is my favorite sketch of the year. Still.
Wow.
And I think Laugh and Tosh is like top 3 updates. Maybe top 1. I don't know. So I am a big Aristotle
lowest moment.
Yeah. It was my highest moment. So yeah, I'm a huge Aristotle fan. But I was like, all right, people keep throwing out Lauren Holt because an advantage we have on BTN X, as in by the numbers 10 that we're doing right now.
We're going to go to Roman numerals now.
Yeah, like a Super Bowl.
I thought you were saying like TEDx, like a TED Talk. It's like, yeah, it's a TED Talk series, sure.
So now an advantage we have as, our sophomore year on SNL Network is we can look back. We now have context. Before we had zero context. We were just going in completely cold. And it's like, all right, the most recent example is of someone being a one and done is Lauren Holt. And so if anyone wants to suggest that Aristotle will be, I certainly hope he won't be. But let's take a look at how they were doing at the same time, because now we have the knowledge that Lauren Holt was not invited back. So right now we're seeing a list of their appearances by length for Lauren Holtz last season and Aristotle this season, and what segment they were in and how long they were.
Okay, so what were your takeaways, Mike, from hearing this? From doing all this?
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, Lauren Holt truly only had like one A role last year, which was her update piece, the Mackenzie Taylor-Joy like Valentine's Day piece she did. And so that was 2 minutes, 46 seconds. And then the other one that was longer than that was her appearance in Maya Rudolph's monologue, which is just kind of just to bring the rookies on stage, her and Punky specifically. So, and Aristotle's had 2. And like I just said, personally, they were 2 of my faves of the entire season. So right away, that's advantage Aristotle. But at this point, Lauren Holt had more appearances, 2 of them being voices off screen. So take that with a grain of salt. But she's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more appearances than Aristotle has at this time last year. I think we're talking a lot about like Lauren Holt was just kind of just being thrown in a lot of things in like a small way. Whereas we're like, damn, like you can't throw Aristotle in the small role in this sketch. Like anyone could do this. Why don't you just give him a chance? One of them is him in a Spider-Man suit. Like that's an appearance for him. So for no voices, he did have that small appearance. And then one thing that was disappointing was I'm like, wow, Aristotle's 3rd longest appearance was last week with that word crunch sketch when like he really did not get nearly that many lines as like 80, who was the other contestant with Zoe Kravitz. So I was looking at that and being like, those are my biggest takeaways, is that like Aristotle has had more shine in his tenure, but Lauren Holt was definitely being used more frequently.
Right. And I think that, Nicole, before you jump in here, I think that this is the one case we can talk about, which is always fun to look at the numbers. But this is the one case where I actually think the numbers don't necessarily count in terms of the decision making. I think it's an indicator of where things are going. I think we can evaluate what's happening on the screen, and we can certainly talk about Lauren Holt's career versus Aristotle's Atari's career on SNL. But if it was just a matter of somebody not doing what, not getting the screen time on the show, and that would mean they were gone, Melissa would have been gone 36 years ago. So I don't think that is what's happening here. I think that it's interesting to look at this thing, but there's a lot of factors. And again, I've been arguing for weeks on the patron feedback shows that Aristotle is going to be okay, but I still think it's cool to look at the charts just to at least broach the subject. Nicole, do you want to say anything about the Lauren versus Aristotle numbers comparison?
Yeah. So another one, when Mike said that Aristotle's third longest was the word crunch, and then his fourth longest was the Fox News Ukrainian cold open, and I was in the audience for that one, or for the dress rehearsal, and like he got a solid minute 4 seconds from pretty much just like being in the background. So it's the same thing. Like he's really had Angelo and the Laughintosh. Those were his two like big moments. But that's one more big moment than Lauren Holt had. Lauren Holt really just had the one. Yeah, I mean, I think you guys like kind of covered it. Lauren's, if for any audio listeners, we're looking at two sides, and Lauren's is the list of appearances sorted by length, so how long each one was, top to bottom, and then Aristotle's on the other side, and it's as of the same number of episodes. And it's interesting, like Lauren just has so many more like of these like 13-second ones, 24 seconds, whereas Aristotle has like a handful of like the 4s and the 6 and the 8-second ones, and then a couple like 15, 17, and then he just pretty much jumps to like 2 random like minute ones, and then his 2 big moments. So I think I don't know. I think to a point numbers don't necessarily tell the whole story, but I also think these numbers are telling a lot of a story, and it does make me a little bit nervous.
Okay, so here's what I would say. If you're going to look at these charts and you're going to take anything away from a numbers perspective, I would look at this. Lauren Holt had 8 appearances in season 46 that were over a minute. Okay. Aristotle has had 4 appearances in season 47 that are over a minute. I think we would look to see, can we get 4 or more appearances in the last 6 episodes from Aristotle that are over 1 minute in terms of total screen time in that sketch. I think that's what you're probably looking for as an indicator of like hitting a safety zone. Because I think if they both have 8 appearances over a minute between 46 and 47, I still think Aristotle's okay. So that would be where I'm headed in terms of like what my mindset is from a numbers perspective. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about what's coming up next. Mike, we want to talk about primetime percentage. This is something that we talked about many episodes on By the Numbers, and primetime is defined as the time in the episode between the cold open and weekend update when most people are watching the show. So what are we going to look at in this chart?
What percentage of your total screen time is occurring during that period from the show beginning to update ending? If you appear in the first sketches of the monologue or during the monologue, or on the update desk, there's a very good chance that you're going to have a lot more eyeballs on you on TV. So I think it's not one that I've done for this season yet. So I just crunched this today. I was like, all right, let me just add up the prime time and cross it with the totals to see what comes out. Because this is a stat that I think when I debuted it like a long time ago, I was like, this is what I would want to be on the top of. I would want to be like, hey, I don't get a ton of screen time. Maybe I'm new, but when I'm on the show, like, all my friends and family are seeing me because they're awake at 11:45, and I had my one bit and I left. So I think it's a very good question. I'd love to hear John and Nicole, like your opinions on this. Now that we've been doing this for a long time, is like, would you rather star in the 10-1 or have like a minute and a half, sizable role in the first sketch, because like we just looked at Angelo. Aristotle had over 3 minutes, but it was the 10-1. It was like him, Daniel Craig, and Cecily, and that was it. And if you didn't stay up to watch it or didn't catch it on YouTube, you're probably like, obviously not listening to this podcast, but you're like, oh, I didn't see that sketch. So I'd love to know your opinions on that. But for this chart on the screen right now, we have the 3 categories again, like green, yellow, red, and the top of the chart is not who has the most screen time, but percentage based on their total. What is the most prime time?
Right. And this is really important, I believe, also when SNL starts to sell advertising during the show, what gets placed, in terms of what part of the show. They'll probably, I assume that the ads will go for much more during prime time of the show versus the after weekend update slots. So it's always interesting to look at that in terms of what cast members are featured during this time. So in the green zone, for anybody who's over about 75.8% of their screen time happens during prime time, that would be Che and Jost, who are on weekend update during the prime time. And then as far as the rest of the cast members are concerned, Pete Davidson is at almost 95% of his almost 90% of his screen time. Alex Moffat at about 84.8. James Austin Johnson, 78.7. Cecily at 78. Kate McKinnon is at 76.9, almost 77% of her screen time. In the yellow, this ranges anywhere between 75 and 63%. We have Chloe Fineman, Mikey Day, Chris Redd, Aidy Bryant, Heidi Gardner, Kyle Mooney, and Melissa. And then anything below 63.58, so this ranges from Ego at 63.45 all the way down to 49.45%, 57% of your screen time is in prime time. And that's Ego, Keenan, Punky, Bowen, Sarah, Aristotle, and Dismukes. Okay, Nicole, color commentator, set up your thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Very interesting. I mean, for me, what is a theme in the green zone is pretty much weekend update, cold open kings, and then people who are really dynamic and are often in cold opens and also are just in a lot of things, like Jost and Che, Alex Moffat, and JAJ, and then Cecily Strong and Kate. Like, those are my categories. And then, of course, the one person in there who I did not just mention is Pete Davidson, and he is number 3 right after Jost and Che. And this one's funny. I think it's when you have such a huge star like Pete Davidson and he's on the premises, like, you're going to put his stuff up front because that's what people are talking about. At the Kim Kardashian episode, which now is an interesting one to reflect on, the first sketch after the monologue was the one where Kim and Pete kissed in the Aladdin sketch. And, that placement obviously was intentional. And when you have those Pete moments that you want the whole world talking about, you're going to put them up front. So Pete feels like the one exception to these rules, or I guess he's his own rule. It's like weekend update, cold open people, dynamic people who are often in cold opens and are also often in everything. And then that like typical old school, like SNL superstar who everybody is talking about and people just want to know that person as a celebrity, as a rock star, whatever. So that's the whole green. And then Mike, you asked a few minutes ago, would I rather be in that green or would I rather be just like killing it in the 10-1s? And I think that there's a lot to be said. And I know John will relate to this because as a Will Forte, because Will Forte is John's fave. There's something to be said for like having a cult following for like being a 10-1 person. Was one of the sketches that has imprinted on me the most this whole season. I bring it back up all the time. Was that mail-in poop one from the first episode with Sarah and Dismukes? It just I always come back to it, and I feel like we're gonna see more of that duo in the 10-1 slot. And like I kind of wouldn't even want it to be anywhere else in the episode. It's fun. It's a little stressful because anything at the end could get cut. It always could. But it's kind of fun to know that by the end of the episode, like there are certain people you can rely on to just be like loose. That's kind of a bad poop joke. Loose.
That thing's going right in the trash.
There you go. Loose stools. But it's just fun. You can rely on people like Sarah and Dismukes by the end of the night to just like give us something stupid and amazing like that. And there's something to be said for truly every part of this list, every section of it. Those are just my main takeaways.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think that when it comes to the percentage of your screen time being in the 5-1 or 10-1, in terms of the Will Forte example, I think that is for the niche audience, the SNL, the diehards, the people who will stay up and watch the Johns, the people who will stay up and watch every single sketch and then scour the internet for the cut for times and all that stuff. I think those are the, that's where that stuff gets really interesting. But I think that as far as, like you said, the general public, the casuals, the people who are watching SNL and aren't, diving deep into the stats and data, we're looking for who pops on camera. And I think that the most fascinating thing here is if you looked at the people in the green, right, Shane Jost excluded, I think Pete, James Austin Johnson, Cecily Strong, and Kate McKinnon are some of the biggest names on the show right now. Interestingly enough, Alex Moffat is in the green, who I wouldn't necessarily say is one of the bigger names on the show if I had to rank them. But I think that him being in the green is a good sign that people are, he's being pushed out a little bit more. So anyways, I just find the stat absolutely fascinating because I think it totally makes sense. I think Ego is one to watch that's really interesting for being in the red. Keenan's also in the red. Keenan, I think, more in the red because he's just in everything. So that's probably why it's diluted. But
whereas Pete famously leaves before he admitted it on air, like he's gone for the good night. So why would he be available at 12:51 a.m. if by 1:01 a.m. he's like, peace out? So yeah, he's not even available. Like you want to be a Keenan or an Ego who is like all across the episode too. You don't want to just be like, all right, I'm out of here. Yeah. No shade to Pete, but
yeah. Did you see that Pete's not going to space this week in the end?
I did see that. Yeah.
Yeah,
he can't quite fly away from Kanye. I was hoping he would.
Yeah, I know. He just took away so many jokes from us about Chad, about Kanye, everything. It just you had to stay on our planet, Pete. All right, Mike. Anything else from the primetime percentage chart?
I was going to throw in that Alex has been in 9 of the cold opens. So 15 episodes, but one of them didn't really have a cold open, which is Paul Rudd. So 9 out of 14, really.
And also the one. The Ukrainian chorus also, you could kind of take out as a bit of an outlier too.
Yeah, 9 out of 13 is good number. And then also just an interesting side note that I've learned from doing the stats so long is that a high profile host, I was glad John mentioned like advertising, is when we get like a Sudeikis or a Mulaney or like the episodes are shorter. Like when we get like an Ariana DeBose or a Reggae Jean Page, like people that like are not household names, but like even SNL fans have never heard of often, like we get more content. So that's one thing to look forward to. If maybe you see a name on the note card, you're like, who the hell is that? You're like, oh, well, you probably get an extra sketch out of it because they don't sell as much advertising in those shows. And I just like, that's when I do the screen time charts, I'm always like, oh, like interesting. Like this episode was like 3 minutes longer than last week. I'm like, oh, probably because like it was Mulaney and they thought there'd be more eyes on it. But then like sometimes you see like the ratings are like bad for that episode or something, and you're like, oh well, whatever. But sometimes a high profile name, I feel like they just sell more ads because more people are watching. It makes sense.
Mike, I have a question.
And also
for you.
They can convert more. Just one idea on that. They can probably convert more people to go if they post more on YouTube that didn't make the air. They can monetize that as well. So if it's like all this stuff didn't make it on air, but we also have more to direct you to, and the more than just the casuals will go, find that content if it's a really well-known, beloved host compared to someone who isn't as known. So that's another thing to think about. I would imagine.
Yes. Okay. I have a question for you, Mike. If Monette in the chat sparked this for me, but if a cast member was not on this planet during an SNL episode, do they still get counted as an official episode?
Oh, Monette, you just started something. John will never let this one down. I don't think.
Were they part of the cast while they were in space?
Yes, they were announced. Unfortunately, oh my God. Okay.
It counts.
Yeah. I mean, if they're announced, they're in the show.
They're out of the atmosphere. All right. Okay. Let's.
What?
If you're on a plane, people I'm sure have been on planes at the time of the
I think
episode.
someone in the chat might have said it maybe better than I will, but like there's so many reasons why you could not make it to air. So John, we talked about like I get not wanting to reward someone for doing another project. You mentioned Lovitz, Fly on the Wall, obviously great podcast. Check that out. But like there's so many reasons to like there's something about like like your one sketch got cut and now that you're just not even like no, you're in the cast. It's a team. That season, it's a team.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right, thanks, Nicole.
Yeah.
Right. Anyways, it's just.
But I think let's keep talking about it, and maybe like some other idea, like something like space will convince me to change my mind. Not quite space. Maybe if there's like a new planet discovered and that's where Pete Davidson is going to go, then maybe we'll think about it.
Got it. Okay.
I
how
am
far away from our planet, Mike, does it have to go?
Yeah.
Okay.
How far away?
All right.
How many millions of miles?
Yeah, let's do our last chart for the evening. And a lot of talk about first-time hosts this season. So I believe, the Jake Gyllenhaal has hosted the show before. And then obviously we had Paul Rudd and we had John Mulaney. So out of the first 18 episodes of the season, we're going to be having 15 first-time hosts. So this is a very interesting discussion that we have. Mike, do you want to talk about the chart that we have up on screen?
Yeah, I just think going forward, and when we started the season with 4 first-timers, Owen Wilson, Kim Kardashian, Rami Malek, Jason Sudeikis, and we just kept getting more and more and more. And I threw a stat out there that we had the longest streak ever from after Maya Rudolph till we got Paul Rudd. So there's been so many first-timers. I think it's a big headline of this season. I think it's like I always am interested when SNL tips their hand a little bit. We talked about the solo monologues on a lot of shows on the SNL Network. And so when they tip their hand a little bit to maybe say, hey, we had a discussion and we're going to do this more this season. We see that in sports a lot. Like they changed their offense this season or they changed the officiating on this rule this season. So if SNL can give us a little insight into what they're thinking, I always like to look at that from a data perspective. And then I looked at my chart of first-time host percentage, and I'm like, wow, like the last era of SNL was really like they were recycling a lot of hosts more than ever in the show. So for this chart, I put from season 30 to now. But I mean, I have the full chart, and it's like it's up a lot more. And then this is the biggest dip in the chart, and now we're including the three new hosts announced today. This is like 7th place all time in SNL history of the most percentage of first time hosts with 83.3%. And the lowest dip was season 45 with 27.8. So that's
all right. You want me to one up you? Okay.
Sure. Go ahead.
All right. I have a note on my phone. Okay. On April 23rd, 2021, I was at home. I was probably bored. I decided, why don't I count the amount of first-time hosts on every season in the history of the show? Just for fun. Never know when you're going to use it.
I think I remember texting about this. I remember you texting me telling me you were doing this. I recall.
And I was like, okay, why not? Right. So Mike's more analytical than me. Mike decides he's going to do things in terms of percentages, but I'm just curious. I'm a counter. I'm a count
John, I was going to say that.
Yeah.
I was like, John is a counter.
Yeah, call me Count John.
Counter.
Okay.
Count
so,
John.
yeah. So I was looking back, and I believe, if I'm reading this correctly, a lot of numbers here. I believe season 7 had the most first-time hosts with 15 first-time hosts. Okay. Season 47, going to tie that. All right. As of the Lizzo episode. So that would mean for one of the final 3 episodes of the season, if just one of them is a first-time host, this season will have the most first-time hosts in the history of the show. Mike, are you double checking your data in case I'm wrong? Because I'm pretty sure.
I had season 7 number 1 as well. But the premiere had we're considered that a no host, right?
Yeah, is that a Chevy one? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. No, I think there might be no host. There might be no host for that one.
Right. Because I'm just seeing like Susan St. James, George Kennedy, Donald Pleasance, Lauren Hutton, Bernadette Peters, Tim Curry, Robert Conrad, John Madden, So mine was based on episodes. So, I mean, were there any doubles this year? I don't think so. So I just had Bill Murray was the only repeat host. So it was like, there was tons
No,
that year.
season eight was the Chevy one where he was on the TV and he wasn't really in the
Right.
building.
True.
Yeah. But yes. Okay. So yeah, I mean, percentage is an interesting way to look at it in terms of this being extremely above average on this chart here on screen. We have the average 57.3% of first time hosts per season between season 30 and 47. This will be at like over 83%. I have to imagine one of the three in May is going to be a first time host. So I think we're going to break the record this year for sure.
So we're calling season 7 like 18 out of 20 episodes.
I have 15. I think 15 episodes were first time hosts. Am I wrong about that?
Said like Susan St. James, George Kennedy, Donald Pleasance, Lauren Hutton, Bernadette Peters, Tim Curry, Robert Conrad, John Madden, James Coburn, Bruce Dern, Elizabeth Ashley, Robert Urich, Blythe Danner, Daniel Travanti, Johnny Cash, Robert Culp, Dana DeVito, and Olivia Newton-John.
All right, maybe. I don't know. I got to tell you, I think this is an off podcast discussion. We're gonna have to go into this again, but. Okay, if I'm wrong, it's either season 7 or this season, but it's been basically it's been 40 years. So that's the point. It's been a long time since this whole thing happened. So crazy that they're going for so many first time hosts. I don't know if it's the lack of interest in repeating hosts from people they're asking and they're not getting the responses, or it's just the wanting to bring new blood to the show. But either way, it's kind of fun to talk about a host that's never hosted the show before because you get some surprises, you get some interesting discourse from stuff like that. So Nicole, any 2 cents on? Of course, yeah.
Yeah, here's my theory. I think it's not necessarily that interest is lower. I think it's people, maybe, actors, stars, they're just like us. And I think the more peak pandemic was really rough and there weren't as many opportunities, like, things were shut down or projects were postponed. And SNL, with few exceptions, was up and running for the most part. But now I think people want to be like back on their game and booked project to project to project, movie to TV show. And like, I think people aren't allotting the amount of time it takes to host SNL, a week plus to really be present the way that they would have 2 or 3 years ago. So I think it's kind of somewhere in between. Like, I think people are just like, I love to do it, but I have some years to make up for some lost time in my career. So I maybe in a few years, like, try me again.
All right, Mike, I figured out where I made a mistake. Okay.
All right, go ahead.
You ready for
this? You like my point?
Yeah. I love your point. I love all your points. Okay. Yes, your point taken. Okay. In season 7, there were 15 one-time hosts, not first-time hosts. So if somebody's come back and hosted the show since season 7, I took them off the board, right? So obviously you can't calculate who's going to come back in the future of season 47. But if we look at just a one-time host, they have the most one-time hosts in the history of the show.
The one and dones.
The one and dones. Thank you. Yes. So people who came back and hosted again, that is the answer.
All right. Because I'm like, I have 18 out of 20,
Yeah.
But if you don't count the no host, it'd be 18 out of 19 because obviously no one hosted the premiere. But I wanted to ask you guys, like, do you think that the episodes, I know the season, like, where it's so fresh, but like, do you think that the episodes have a different vibe? And in what way, if there's a first timer? Either of you.
Well, this is the thing. I can see both sides, right? Because I'm talking about from a podcasting perspective. I think this is my thing. As a podcaster, I think it's more fun actually sometimes to talk about a first time host because there's a lot to, there's a lot to guess what's going to happen. It's very interesting to then evaluate and talk about if they're a good host or not. I think from a viewership, from a fan of the show, I like seeing people return, especially if they haven't been at the show for a few years. I think that's always really fun to see what people come back. I think, like I said, meta is always good for the show. And I think whenever somebody comes back to host, there's always a meta aspect to the show. So I think
Meta, the company that owns Facebook and Instagram, is good for the show.
Meta World Peace, former player for the Lakers.
That too.
Yeah. So I think we'll keep going. But I think that, so I definitely see both sides. As far as this season is concerned, I think when it comes to a lot of people started to see this season as turning towards a new era of the show, especially with some really strong first-year cast members. I think when you have first-time hosts with with a newer cast in general, people start to develop relationships, and you start to look at these new hosts as potentially being a part of this era. So I think if you talk about the more successful hosts from the seasons, including the Rami Maliks and the Oscar Isaacs of the season, you could start to think, okay, when James Austin Johnson and Sarah and hopefully Aristotle and Chloe and Andrew are in their 5th and 6th and 7th seasons, how fun will it be to have Oscar Isaac back to host the show, because they were originally part of the beginning of their eras. I think that's where it gets fun. If you have a cast that's been around for a long time, then I think, repeating hosts makes more sense.
That's a great point. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
fun.
I
It
totally
makes
agree.
it more fun to envision things. Like Oscar Isaac, after that, I was like, I need every relationship that he had, any person that he was partnering with in a sketch, I was like, I want more of this, next time. It'll just be great. And also it's starting, maybe some of these characters will become recurring, and that'll be so much fun. These first time hosts, we're kind of standing at this interesting time in history. All of these people were not on the SNL, map before this season. They weren't like in the history books of SNL. And now all these characters, these one-off characters that they did, could become a huge part of the show. Like anything Oscar Isaac did that episode could become a recurring thing that becomes his thing when he's on the show, which is cool to think about.
For sure. Okay. Mike, as always, fantastic job on all the charts, all the numbers that we saw here tonight. Nicole, always appreciate your analysis. Let's talk about what's coming up here on the SNL Network. So obviously we are in our off weeks, one of the 2 breaks that we get before we return for the Carmichael episode, and Gunna returning not this weekend, but next weekend. But we do have some fun shows that are coming up. If you haven't heard, next Monday, we will be back with the Superfans. I'll be sneaking my way on into the Superfan Takeover because this one was too fun to miss out on.
Classic.
We're going to be doing... It's going to be a classic March Madness style bracket where we're going to talk about the best catchphrases in the history of SNL. And we have taken over the weekend your votes. You come on social media, whether it's on Twitter and Instagram, and you suggested a ton of catchphrases. We have seeded those catchphrases into the bracket, and we will determine what is the ultimate SNL catchphrase. That will be next Monday night. Mike, do you have a pick? Any favorite catchphrases?
All time? I don't.
Yeah.
There's so many. I don't know. I have to see the bracket. Do you have
All
it?
right, that's fair. Well, I do have it, but I'm gonna save it for next week. I don't want all the listeners to be spoiled.
It's not
for
special.
The show.
I have an idea.
Special might be on the bracket.
Yeah.
That'd be a good one. I actually just rewatched that because of The Eyes of Tammy Faye. I watched that movie, slight tangent, and Church Lady did a thing with Tammy Faye. So I just rewatched that like 2 days ago. Yeah, how about this, John? Just think off the top of your head. Instead of making Mike and me do work, you do work. Give each of us an SNL catchphrase that you think embodies our personalities. Go.
Oh God.
Just it's on the spot.
Let's see.
I like to make you just made put Mike on the spot, so I had to just turn it right back to you.
All right, so this one's Nicole.
Hey, you get your fat ass on my lap, bitch.
I feel like
okay, I accept that.
Yeah, I feel like
classic
that's Nicole.
catchphrase.
Yeah, that's one of the most classic catchphrases there is. You'll definitely see that one. Yeah, you'll
Very
definitely see you'll see that one in the bracket. And sometimes Mike is
Power!
Yeah, that's Mike when he's talking about the episode counts. He just
there you go. Okay. Do you have one for yourself?
Yeah. How about this one?
Bitch.
Yeah.
Yeah,
sometimes.
You love that one.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Okay. Yeah. No, there's going to be some fun ones, not just ones, the fun ones in the history of the show. So it's going to be controversial. It's going to be interesting. We're going to talk about it. So have some fun and join us next Monday night for that bracket as we break things down and pick the ultimate SNL catchphrase.
Number 1 prediction.
Sure.
Live from New York. It's Saturday night.
That is not on the bracket, so but it should be.
Obviously, the stats guy wants that one. That's classic for the show.
Dana
that's what we're rooting for over
McLaughlin
here.
Group. Wrong.
Yeah, Yeah, wrong. That is a good one as well. Okay, so yeah, a lot of fun going through the catchphrases. You'll get to see all those next week. We will also then be back with Hollywood Dish. Nicole, do you want to tell the listeners why they should check out that show?
Yes, Hollywood Dish is the show that you want to tune into if you want when SNL comes back. You want to be tuned in to everything going on in pop culture. We cover everything. We always talk about Britney Spears, no matter what. That's our tradition on the show. It's so much fun. Me and Rebecca North, we cover everything. And then once you watch SNL, you're just going to know every pop culture reference that they talk about, and even just beyond SNL. It's just really fun pop culture. And yeah, we'll be back in like what, a week plus.
10 days, you'll be back.
10 days.
For Hollywood
exactly.
Dish. Yeah, and of course we have our hot take shows. We are booking our roundtables, our patron feedback shows as well. So it'll be really, really fun to go through April and talk through everything from Saturday Night Live. So of course, appreciate you all joining us. Mike, where can the listeners reach out to you and get more of your data?
Real quick, Bruins just beat the Habs, so I thought I should tell you that,
God.
John. So
Yeah.
I think I won the debate. I think the Bruins beat the Habs. Yeah, the
Classic
Canadiens.
Boston guy.
What's the Habs?
Montreal Canadiens. They're a NHL team.
Oh, it's Canadian. Of course, it's a weird name. Classic.
Yeah, Canadiens.
All right.
You can find me at SNL Mike Murray. So hit me up. I'm on Twitter and Instagram.
Yes, for sure. Looking forward to chatting more with you, Mike, or maybe never again after our conversation. It's 10 and that's it. Nicole, thank you for joining us. Where can listeners reach out to you?
Thank you. Pleasure as always. You can find me at Nicole Rovine on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. If you've been watching me on whatever shows, I just changed my TikTok back to my handle. So everything is my name. And then of course, all of our SNL Network socials interact with us. It's fun, especially the off weeks. Like we're just doing a lot of fun, random stuff always. So even then it's more fun. I feel like just to be like chatting with people and let us know what you think of everything we're doing over there too.
Yeah, for sure. You can definitely find us on all socials. You can find me at Jon Schneider 24, and obviously make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. I was having a great conversation with a friend about the podcast, and he said to me, John, I love your podcast, but you never get any ratings on the iTunes or the Apple review store. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I really wish more people would give us ratings. So if you don't mind, please give us a 5-star or whatever star you think of our show review, and let us know. Maybe it's not as 5 stars if you don't love us as much, but whatever
totally
it is.
Fair. We're numbers people. You can give us 4 stars and details as to why it's 4 stars. We love that. I'd rather 4 stars with details than 5. Just do it. Just tell us what you think.
Yeah, for sure. Give us the analytical reason about why you gave us those stars. But if you don't mind leaving us a review on the Apple Podcast Store, would always appreciate that for any of our loyal listeners that we love very much. Okay, for Mike Murray and Nicole Rovine and everyone else in the chat, I hope you enjoyed our By the Numbers show, By the Numbers X. We'll see you next time, everybody.
Not TEDx.
Have a good one.